And with that, it is another Wednesday, which means it's time for Not Playing Politics. I am Alexander Keaton, and as always, I've got my Rio Nick Bradshaw. Nick, how the heck you doing?
I'm doing well. I appreciate all of our fans here checking in. A couple of you guys got in ahead of us, so that's commitment. We're going to draw from you guys tonight.
Awesome. So, how have you been?
What you doing? You called me. No, I'm doing well. Evidently, the weather down here, wind is the new thing. We had a storm. We had a winter storm. That was cool. Then the temperature spiked, got really hot again. Then it dropped off, and now the wind has been blowing at. And I don't want to be dramatic. I know a lot of my friends and family listening know I can tend to overstate, be hyperbolic here, but I think the wind was blowing.
No,
I think
you hyperbolic. Never.
I think the wind was blowing at about 732 miles an hour.
Right.
I've never seen the wind like that before. I could literally feel the compression inside of my house. Like it, I checked online. It said it was 30 plus miles an hour. The gusts.
Yeah. So we were getting about 65 miles an hour this morning when it came in up here, around the Dallas area. And that thing hit. The storm hit. The wind hit. I'm just like, well, all right. It was like 65 miles an hour up here for gusts. So yeah, it was nuts. And yeah, it's windy as all get out. In fact, we started having like these little tiny fractional blackouts this afternoon because the wind was so high. We were sort of losing power. So if that happens, you'll understand if I disappear magically, you'll know what happened. Sure. And yes, to Cheese Freak Ginger Snap. Yes, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I believe you're East Coast. So yeah, Central Standard Time, 7 p.m. We're going to be here. So 8 p.m. your time. But yeah, aside from the crazy weather.
Yeah, one thing. Let me hop in here real quickly, Alex. I appreciate the time. Thank you. One thing I want to do is just take a moment to say, for those of you who remember. I was a kid of the 80s, a teen of the 90s, and for those in that age group, we remember the mighty John Candy, of course, from Uncle Buck fame, and that of basically if it was John Hughes in the later part of the 80s, early 90s, he did it. Cool Runnings, but there's a great scene in Home Alone when the mother is desperately rushing home to get her son, and she finally meets up with this guy named Gus and his band that he's playing. And I believe his name was Gus, like my father. And he gets there and he starts talking about his record sales. And he's like, we sold 632 copies in Sheboygan. They loved us in Sheboygan. And I'm thinking about our fans now that I love the fact that our family and friends from across the country tune in. That means so much to us guys, really. So for those of you that are out there, Cheese Freak, and I believe I'm never going to get it right because I can never remember if Illinois is in the same time zone or not. I'm going to say because Chicago is a time zone ahead that maybe they're a time ahead, but there's some out there that I appreciate you guys tuning in from all over the place. I've got family and friends in Florida and people in California, and it's really great. It means a lot. So that's a roundabout way to say thank you for tuning in wherever you are. We do kick off at 7 p.m. Central Standard. But we appreciate you guys going above and beyond to listen to us. Thank you very much.
I thought Chicago was Central Standard too. Hold on. Now I need to know.
It is. It is.
Okay. It is.
It absolutely. But you know what? For purposes of tonight, we're going to put them an hour ahead just to say, you know what? You guys get there first.
There you go.
We're getting blown away to the set of The Wizard of Oz. So whatever that means. But yeah.
Well, and as much as we love all of you, wherever you are, we would love it if you were from Sheboygan.
Exactly. We're big hit in Sheboygan. Big hit. 652 records. They really loved us in Sheboygan.
Anyway, so speaking of Sheboygan, as everyone knows, is the home of hangovers, which is really where where we're going with Trump today. That's
a non-drinker and a deacon. You got to love this. I mean, boy, are we qualified to talk about this.
Exactly. Well, you love how smooth that transition was there.
Oh, that was fantastic.
Making all of Sheboygan alcoholics. Anyway.
Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We're going to be sued by the city of Sheboygan next week, and we will be living out of a box.
Living in a van down by the river. Actually, I'd dig that. So anyway, it's like, don't threaten me with a good time, fella. So I'm so done. Okay, so yeah, we called it Trump Hangover because let's be honest. What is the entire media doing right now? They are trying to do anything and everything they can to bring Trump into the news cycle. Like, they can't get over this guy. Like, he's that ex-girlfriend that's living to find some way to be in your, they keep showing up at your house at 3:00 in the morning and you're worried about your pets. What is going on with this, man?
Well, I think that we're at a place, it's funny you bring that up because, for a lot of our listeners out there, again, we want to provide a platform for us to come together and share ideas and not just turn it into the libs are so crazy and the Dems are the worst. Like, that's not what the objective of this show is. The objective of this show is to create an environment for us to have engageable conversation about topics that we feel are impacting us. Not only for us to share those ideas, but to turn those ideas into an application of action. That's what we want to do with this show. There's the mission statement. But what's fascinating is that when you get to have anecdotes that perfectly personify what you're experiencing, it not only makes for a very easy show to work on in production, but for someone like me who's an anecdotal learner, I'm very much of a hands-on, tell me a story about it. I was raised in large part by my grandmother, who raised me on stories about World War I, World War II, the Depression, all these things. And so that's how I've always learned. So when I look to the media recently,
you learn by antidotes?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So like if I get poisoned, you're my guy.
That's it. Yeah, no, but by anecdote. And so what I'm getting at is, if there are two or three that pop to mind, what I see is, number one, you guys may have seen in the news, the Washington Post story that legitimately I feel like was written by a 9-year-old in crayon, except that the 9-year-old, like most of us, once we had that many lies, would just start crying and be like, I didn't even do it. I was dead at the time. Like you don't even acknowledge it. It was so bad. It was so cartoonish. When you see the level with which the credibility is just utterly shot. And for those of us that have worked in the industry or taught at the collegiate level or done whatever your engagement was with media, if you read the paper or the news, you just say, at what point do you finally go, okay, it's that abusive relationship, like you said. And I feel like that's what's been happening. The media has been abusive to its viewers because they've had a captive audience because of COVID. Second point to that is, you see what's going on at the border crisis, and the Speaker of the House says, well, we inherited this problem. Well, wait a minute. You came in and said that the objective was to reverse all of these things, was that the reason that there was a problem is using these kids in cages and having these problems. And now you're seeing that you guys were going to come in and do all these things, and it's generated this massive problem. But nope, that's still Trump's fault. Okay. Also, if something good happens, like the market starts picking up again, it's not Operation Warp Speed opened up people to vaccinations, which got the economy stimulated, which kept it from really tanking. And now as it opens up, it'll be everyone keeps saying the greatest stimulus to the economy is going to be just opening up again. But you can't credit the previous administration with that because there's nothing that they did ever. That's not a new trick that everyone's been using, but it's just fascinating when you see that no matter what it is, it's just a designed sales pitch because you're quick side note. It's like going to a Ford dealership and them telling you that they don't care if you buy a Ford, just as long as you don't go down the road and buy a Chevy, because those Chevys are the worst things that's ever happened in your life. Until you go to the Chevy dealership and they say, they don't care if you buy a Chevy, just don't whatever you do buy a Ford because it's the worst thing that's ever happened. With regard to a president that does not speak to the public at all, a media that seems to prop that up, and countless examples of seeing things such as this news story that was completely debunked, the southern border, which is legitimately on fire, and people are just kind of cool with it. I feel like it's not just the Trump hangover as we're calling it. I feel like, as we talked about earlier in production, and I'll let you take it there how you want, we have sacrificed understanding the common value and virtue of honesty, and not just honesty like tell the truth, but I mean like a factual concept of believing something that is actually true. And that's the part that tonight I'm going to kick out to everybody. I want to see the board, see what you guys are thinking. That's what I'm legitimately struggling with. Earlier tonight, that's what I was thinking about. I have a real problem. I can't answer those questions to anybody anymore. I don't. When I read something, I don't know what I'm seeing. And again, if I may pester the peanut gallery here for 2-3 seconds, whether it's us being told that we are legitimately dealing with things happening before our eyes that just don't make sense anymore. Two quick examples. Is Andrew Cuomo, is he some type of like supervillain from a Batman movie, and his superpower is just survival? Or is this system so rotten to the core that there truly is no longer accountability? Because either Me Too was a complete joke, which I sincerely hope that victims are always in a position to be heard and to have justice. But it looks like at the time that movement that had such promise and need, and I want to make sure that I state this clearly, I absolutely support anybody who has ever suffered that type of abuse being heard and having justice without question. It just seems like when it comes to Cuomo, it's this, well, and it's laughable. It's legitimately laughable how it's been so mishandled. Forgive my little diatribe here, guys, but in particular, like I said, it's not just the concept of what's been going on. It's that I'm struggling to put into words how I'm seeing what the truth is, and I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Because as I said, I believe that all victims deserve the right to not only have their story heard, the facts of the matter investigated and researched, and those brought to justice. But what we were screaming about with Brett Kavanaugh doesn't seem to apply to Andrew Cuomo. Is it because they're males? Is it because they're white guys? Because if that were the case, they're both males, they're both white guys, they're both, in political / governmental offices. That doesn't seem to be it. The only factor I can come up with is that one was identified as a conservative, as one is identified as the prince of the Democrat Party. Can you help me with that, Alex? Because I mean, guys, I'm saying this to everyone listening tonight. I am legitimately struggling with understanding what our value of truth is in our society anymore.
So let me actually sum all of your questions up. All of it.
with Sheboygan.
With Sheboygan. No, actually, since you brought in the Dark Knight, allow me, if you will, to explain everything with one Batman reference. Okay? Are you ready? Are your bat loins girded for this metaphor, sir?
Please never speak about my loins again, ever.
I make no promises. So here's the deal. The answer to your question, sir, is the Scarecrow. Okay? Here's what I mean. Particularly in the comics, the Scarecrow, which he was in the first Batman, the one with what's his face? Swear to me. The Batman Begins, right? He was the main sort of supervillain in that one. The Scarecrow has a fear toxin that induces people to see things that aren't real. He creates fear and panic out of invisible, unknown, hallucinations. That's what he does. That's how he has no real power beyond that. He is a master of manipulating people's minds. He makes you see things that aren't real, and essentially you destroy yourself. That's what he does. He's able to get away with it, at least in the movie. One of the best parts is that he was the one running the asylum. And he actually was in his origin story, we discovered that he was actually using Arkham Asylum to test his this fear toxin, this fear gas that he had. Because as the CIA proved back in the 60s and 70s, you can do whatever you want to mental patients. No one's going to care. So he was using this to perfect it. And then when he would go off and do a supervillainy, he just was able to hide behind his role as Arkham, as an Arkham psychiatrist. And there was enough corruption with the mob, particularly the movie that they showed, like the mob was using him to sort of protect their people. It was corruption, right? But he was in a position for everyone to sort of say, okay, well, this guy is, when he's he's wearing his nice suit and glasses and he looks all respectable, he must be telling us the truth. Why would he lie? Why would he be corrupt? But he was extremely corrupt. But then as a supervillain, he would go out and he would do all of these terrible, terrible things. And he would make people believe things that weren't so, and they would ultimately end up leading to their destruction. Was Me Too ever real? Answer: no. It was a hallucination. It was fear toxin. It was designed to create. It was created and designed to destroy Brett Kavanaugh and any conservative they think they could get at. Is Cuomo just that good of a politician? Is he just that slick? No. It's corruption. And here's the deal. The reason that this whole sexual misconduct is coming out is to hide the fact that they can no longer hide the fact that he murdered on the tune of thousands upon thousands of people. And let me be very specific when I say this. There is no way you can say this was a mistake. It was a clear and deliberate action. And by the way, it was a clear and deliberate action that the governor of, I want to say it's Wisconsin, I may be wrong, but I want to say it was Wisconsin, or maybe it's Michigan, did the same thing. Whatever, and here's the evidence for that. What is her? I use her in quotation marks. The gentleman who is a doctor who now believes himself to be a woman, Rachel Levine, I think, is the name that this doctor is going under, and it now works for the Biden administration.
Yes, transgender representative out of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Well, that individual actually hid, before all these things went through, where they were taking, and again, it wasn't just New York that this happened in; it was several others. That individual took their mother out of an old folks home, out of a rest home, and moved her into a hotel just before they enacted the policies. Why would she have done this? Because she knew what they were about to do. She knew that they were about to murder to the tune of thousands of people. You don't take sick people with what is believed to have been a highly communicable disease at the time, and is still purported to be a very highly communicable disease, and shove it again. Even if you assume that it's akin to a flu, and it is, you don't put them with people for whom that is the target demographic for that it affects the most. Every flu affects. There's two groups that the flu affects. Just a regular flu affects every year: children and the elderly. This thing only seems to target the elderly and those with secondary comorbidities. Anyone of any intelligence, and I mean by intelligence, I mean with over the age of 8, knows not to take someone who's sick and put them with grandma. Cuomo's actions murdered upwards of 13,000 people.
You just sent me this cube-shaped pillow.
And apparently he likes pillows too. So here's the problem.
And it's made with high grade.
Okay, so what's with the high grade pillow, Nick? So the question here becomes to ask your question: was any of this real? Is he a supervillain? Yes, he. Well, here's the problem: he doesn't even have to be a supervillain. He just has to be who he is. It is corrupt. But the supervillain aspect is the fact that they are making us see things that aren't real. They're making us believe things that aren't real. Like, for example, that there is a majority of Americans who agree with this. That there's a majority of Americans who agree that 8-year-olds should be on puberty blockers. That 2 + 2 does not mean 4. That every person who's ever lived is actually a racist. That Um,
But this is my point, Alex. This is I want to jump in real quickly here because I want to make this point. You're hitting on all of it. This is no longer, for example. Let me add to it and then make that point. The add to it. So, Biden's climate czar. I mean, the king of the planet. John Kerry is caught without wearing a mask on a plane. No big deal. Okay. You and I would get kicked off, sent to jail, not get an extra bag of peanuts, whatever. That's what happens. Okay.
Yeah.
Jen Psaki, the press secretary. I am familiar with the policies and procedures in certain manners with which how you want to transparently speak to people and be open and honest with them. You're hearing about how the border facilities, they have literally passed instruction for them to not speak. They've been given orders not to speak to the press. What does she say in a press conference? Quote, "We remain committed to transparency." Pause. "I don't have an update for you on the timeline for access." So, I mean, I've got nothing. The DHS secretaries, finally, people are like, "Oh, well, we're understanding that there's, the entire southern border is on fire for 700 miles, but the questions you're asking are disrespectful." The judges that would be potentially overseeing or voting in or having a role in Cuomo's impeachment were all appointed by him. We've got constant examples of what I'm trying to prove, which is forget the media, forget politics. You said it before. Parents suing so they can give children puberty blockers, and if you don't acknowledge it, Cardi B I can't believe I'm going to make this reference, but Cardi B getting on the award show to make a presentation that was legitimately, I wouldn't even say borderline pornographic. I would say very adult featured on mainstream television. And she's the one that wants to sell it as this is what's empowering for women.
Oh, she was
a traditional value of what empowerment. Look, I was raised by two very strong women, and my parents divorced. My father was very much present. But what I'm getting at is that my grandmother lived with us. And I saw firsthand what very strong women, my stepmother, my sister, very strong women look like. I've been blessed to have that throughout my life. The thought of someone doing whatever you want to call whatever that was, saying that this is empowering the sexuality of women or men, it doesn't acknowledge it for what it can be on a spiritual level, what it can be in a loving relationship, what it can be of any of the things that it's, in my opinion, it's designed to be. But I come back to my same point. Whether it's Jen Psaki talking about circling back and legitimately just not answering questions, cutting off the press, doing whatever it is that you can. We legitimately know Cuomo, we're talking about all of it. Literally, all you have to do to make a claim to change your sex is to just say it. The concept of truth. The Catholic Church came out and basically, if we have any practicing Christian/Catholics, you'll notice this when you hear this. The church, from the perspective of a Christian or Catholic perspective, when the Pope and the Catholic Church came out and made their declarations about not being able to, okay, this was not some groundbreaking perspective. This is the Catholic Church being in alignment with the teachings that have been in the church for 2,000 years. But when
you roll in Judaism,
when Don Lemon comes on and says, well, this is where the church needs to re-examine its teachings and what it's doing, it just shows this first off, a complete lack of understanding, because for some reason we think that because someone reads a teleprompter that they've got credibility. I find that fascinating. But the point that I'm getting at is this. Where is the concept of truth? Let's get away from fact. Forget fact. Let's just talk about truth. A fundamental acknowledgement. Okay, you don't need to be MacGyver. You don't need to be, Peter Falk's character. Somebody help me out. Columbo. You don't need to be Matlock. You got to love these references. Told you, raised by my grandmother. But the point that I'm getting at is that you don't have to be an inspector to pick up on the fact that there are certain things that people either believe to be true or not. And now to have a viewpoint that marriage is between a man and a woman, that men and women are different, that the government should not have the authority to override parents in schools with regard to when their children can go to school and what can happen, the concept of drugs that people are going to be legally able to use or not, opening borders, holding people accountable for assault. I mean, and the worst one of all, I'm going to end on this. I'm going to kick it back to you. For our fans that are listening, for any of you that have served or are currently serving, it's kind of heartbreaking when you see military units, very few and far between, and I'm not coming down on the entire military. I'm looking at a few of those rogue actors that went out there that decided they were going to fire back on their official accounts to public journalists. I only have one simple question. What do you think would have happened if it were 6 months ago and something would have happened that some officer or high-ranking senior enlisted personnel were to make a comment like that under Trump with regard to targeting someone in the media? The universe would be on fire. You would the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, was actually in a position once where he stood next to the president at a church that they were worried about it being burned. And do you remember the backlash that came from that? A 4-star general had to address that publicly. So again, I want to come back to the point, whether it's Cuomo, whether it's people that are just jumping out of these things because it's what they believe or feel or whatever it is, in complete violation of actual military doctrine, in complete violation of military instruction, whether it's COVID or facts that just change based off of what people tell us. You should wear 12 masks. You should never wear a mask. I'm going to come back to it again, whether it's faith, whether it's biology, whether it's history, whether it's the military. This is what I want us to drill down on tonight. And I'm going to harp on it. And I know that I'm harping on it. So thank you guys for all checking in. Maybe you're checking out. But I'm going to ask again. And I'm not going to stop asking. What has happened to the truth and our acknowledgement of it?
The truth is inconvenient.
That's what they said in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, it is. And that's where we are. And that's why it's this. Here's the problem. Okay, I'm gonna sum up a bunch of things real quick. The big problem with the right has been for 40 years. We have asked the exact same question that the left has asked. How do we create a system that's perfect, that always works? Let me help you out. There is no such thing as a perfect system, period. You either have a workable system run by good people who believe in honesty and truthfulness and forthrightness, or you don't. There is no system that you could generate or correct or create that works and will always put out good things if the people in charge of it are corrupt. We have, in fact, it's real easy for me to sit here and say that, yes, in the early analogy, the news media, the extreme leftists, they are scarecrow in the analogy. They're the ones putting out the fear toxins. They're the ones who are manipulating reality to show us things that aren't real. All of it, yes, 100%. But the only reason that Dr. Crane, aka Scarecrow, could do it in Batman, in the comics and in the movie, comes down to the quote-unquote good people, the people who were supposed to be watching and doing the right thing. It was them who were corrupted. It's really easy to look at the liberals and look at the left and say they look at all the terrible things they're doing. They wouldn't be in a position to corrupt the system if those who were put in charge of actually educating our children and maintaining morality and advocating for morality did their job. And here's what, and let me be very, very specific. I'm not talking about the public schools. I'm talking about the church. From every single founders, even the ones that people like to say, oh, look at how these people were deists and these people were fine, all of it. But they all agreed to the man that you needed to have moral people in charge of this system. That you had to be moral, that you had to teach the Bible. Now, I know some people are like, well, you don't have to be a Christian to be moral. You know what? I'm going to tell you, you're lying with that. And we can talk about why that's a damnable lie on another day. You don't have to be a Christian, true, to be moral.
With Mattress Firm's Rest Assured promise.
But what you do need to have is a good mattress to be moral.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm doing some research here or just some reading in the on my screen, and it popped up. My apologies, guys. Good
Remember,
grief.
the 11th commandment: Thou shalt have a decent mattress.
Exactly.
It's the key to morality. But here's the problem. Yeah, you're right.
You know, there's some really comfortable mattresses is in Beautiful city of Sheboygan.
Exactly. Well, that's where you go for mattresses is Sheboygan.
Quick segue. You know what they say. I'll read literally anything you put on the teleprompter in front of me. So, good night, San Diego.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing, right? The problem is, you're right. You don't necessarily need to be a Christian to be moral, but you need to have Christian values. The Judeo-Christian values that created this nation are the ones that the founders themselves said, if you don't have this, you're not going to get where you need to be. This system only works with moral people.
Is that John Adams?
It's all of them. I mean, literally all of them. They all said something to this point numerous times. Like, you can't. It would be harder to find them saying anything else. Everyone agreed that this system required moral people. The church's obligation was to fight for morality. You don't, and here's the problem. At some point, we in the church of all denominations decided that being American or being polite or both was better than being good. We got really comfortable with being comfortable, and we didn't want to be uncomfortable.
Or what is that? The sacrifice of the good in pursuit of the perfection.
Exactly. We wanted to be polite. We wanted to be nice. We wanted to have all the nice things. We wanted to be liked by the world. We at some point bought and we misunderstood the idea that this was a Christian nation. The problem is, when we today say it's a Christian nation, we think, oh, that means everyone in it is a Christian. This means the system is a Christian. No, that's not what the founders meant. They said that the system was predicated on Judeo-Christian ethics. It is that philosophy that is the foundation for which the system was built. But they understood that no system could actually be Christian. That was never their belief. It was that Christians and moral people had to be the ones in control and at the helm, or the system would ultimately always be corrupted, because man is corruptible. We are always corrupted.
They weren't building a theocracy. Yeah, as we discussed earlier, they weren't seeking after a theocracy, and that's why the composition of how it's been warped about the separation of church and state is almost laughable. But I think that the one thing that also comes up lacking, and it's unfortunate, I think confession and forgiveness are integral parts of a society, specifically a moral society. And when you start sacrificing those, things start going sideways. And I mean that to say that's what cancel culture does. You can no longer apologize now, because if you do, the woke schools will come after you in a way that's just unheard. So you can't. The only way to not get canceled is to lean into what you're saying. And it's funny, I've said before on the show, the two people that personified that to me are Donald Trump and AOC. And I don't think it's politically motivated. I don't think it's something that is I say personal, but it ideologically, so much as it's just that perspective. I mean, you can get the bluest blue dog Democrat you've ever seen and a conservative and put them in the room, they can have that same perspective. But the thing that's interesting about this that you mentioned was when you said, about architecting these. Let me catch my breath here. I haven't seen anything coming from those tearing down institutions with an intent to replace them with anything. What I mean by that is when the right seems to want to talk about blowing up the filibuster, when Trump was talking about that, it was to get through policies or things that the Democrats were just obstructing, right? But when the left comes into power, it's not just about their material political objectives. It's about, in fact, destroying the institution itself. Now, my opinion is, if we want to have a whole lot of fun with this, if you destroy the filibuster, then the Senate is nothing more than a 100-member House of Representatives on a longer term. That's it.
Well, hold on, but we're basically already there, because the states aren't the ones that actually determine. Let me rephrase this: the state legislatures don't choose the senators. It was supposed to be that, but hold on, this is entirely I don't want to go too far afield on this. Let's go back to what you said. If we have no place for.
Yeah. I'm sorry, excuse me. So what I'm getting at is that the people that are coming in to tear down these institutions, there's nothing for them to be built in place of. So, for example, when you see something like, and I know it's a ridiculous example, but I'm going to use it anyway. When you see, I didn't watch it because I have no interest in any of that at all, and evidently nobody else did either because the ratings are like 6. It's like 11 million before, now it's actually 6. When you watch the any of these pat yourself on the back award shows, this concept of, well, this is the sexual liberation and freedom and empowerment of women through their sexuality. So it's not designed to replace anything. It's designed to destroy the institution. Because if you come back and say, well, I don't believe that. I believe that the sanctity of physicality and closeness is contained within the act of physical closeness is contained within the sanctity of a marriage. And that's what makes it blessed and beautiful and strong and loving and supportive and all the wonderful things that it can be. And you're going to lose either way. You're going to lose either because your traditional viewpoint is going to be outdated, wrong, and bigoted and homophobic and whatever word it is. But the other side doesn't have to be anything. It can be everything it wants. And then morally, you can break it down philosophically and just say it's about individual expressionism. And anybody pushing against that is silencing the voice of an individual expression. Well, that makes it very simple, doesn't it? If I don't like what you're doing, I'll just call it out. And I don't have to defend it with anything. I mean, this is kind of like I feel like we're watching a lot of the things happen in our society that are, I heard that, I'm quoting this from a movie, but the guy said, these are all the scary parts of the Bible. And when you look at what's happening, like people that just legitimately, there's no sense of truth, whether that's bearing false witness, whether that's lying, whether it's, I mean, to take the Lord's name in vain, you have to acknowledge him. I mean, we said in pre-production, I don't say with any judgment. I'm saying from a position of actual statistics, just numbers that I'm curious about. A couple of years ago, I had a friend of mine once say, well, you know, as an atheist or as an agnostic, I'm so overwhelmingly in the majority or minority that it's just there. And I'm like, And when you look at it now, I think there's no fear about it. I disagree. I don't think that this country, people still want to say, oh, America is this majority country of believers. I don't know that I believe, let me be careful with using words like majority. I don't know that the percentages that we think we have in our minds are those that accurately reflect where the country really is.
Oh no, and I would tell you it isn't. I mean, it's like, which is exactly my point. The problem is what we have long said that it has been misunderstood. We in the modern world we've misused this phrase, Christian nation. And that's the problem. We let ourselves down. And the number one way is through, like you said, and I'm going to add one more leg to your tripod here that actually I think it goes
that just makes it a table.
It makes it a table. Well, you only gave us 2. I'm going to give you a third, which makes it a tripod.
Okay.
So it'll actually stand. Because you said we need to be able to ask for forgiveness. We need to be able to extend it. I think to confess. We need to be able to confess, forgive, and we need to believe in absolute truth. We have to believe in objective reality.
Wait, that was mine too. So you need to come up with a fourth to make it a table. Go ahead.
Well, I said third. You didn't bring that up. You mentioned third. I'm just bringing it all together as a third. But if you want to throw a fourth one in there, fine. We need a common morality. Straight up. This is the point. The Judeo-Christian morality was the common morality. You didn't have to be a Christian per se, but you did have that sense of morality. Here's what I mean. There are cultures that do not share our sense of, or I say our, let's just say Nick and mine, our sense that free speech is a value. They don't agree with that as a moral truth. That human life has innate value. That is not a commonly held value around the world. We have to have a common value system, a common moral system that guides all three. We don't have these things anymore, and we lost them because at some point over the really last 120 years, and I would argue that probably the failure point began much earlier in our nation's history, but it really failed on a catastrophic level about 120 years ago, probably closer to 140 years ago now. And we haven't stood for it. We made politeness, we made being popular. We made all these other things values above actually standing for and enforcing the sense of morality and propriety that is necessary. And here's the problem: when you don't, when the problem with pushing the envelope, right, is that there's gonna be a point where gravity takes over, and there's nothing you can do at that point unless you
Right.
reach over and actually grab that envelope. The problem is, at no point has anyone reached over and grabbed the envelope. I think, and let me take this one step further. I think this is really sort of something we want to sort of a thought to end on. The only reason I am glad that Trump isn't in right now, and I'm going to leave that sentence right there where it is as far as meaning. But the reason I'm glad he's not here right now, the reason we can't hear him, because Twitter's like the one golden, bright, shiny element of this is that those on the right, and this is a very big, broad statement as far as what the right is, because let's face it, a lot of liberals are now on the right because of what's happened with this radical leftist agenda. We no longer have the excuse that Trump is there to protect us. I think one of the biggest failures of the right over the last 50 years is that we asked for politicians to come in and save us. We've been looking for a leader to save us. And the problem was Trump came in, he disrupted the machine, he was able to throw things out of whack. We had a perfect opportunity. The church had a perfect opportunity. Conservatives had a perfect opportunity to rise up and really say and really make a difference. And we didn't. We didn't do it because we kept waiting for leadership to do it. We assumed that the people we had elected were there to actually do their job. Guess what? Ain't none of them there to do their job. We were looking for someone to save us instead of rising up and saving ourselves. We are now seeing who's who actually means it. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm real happy that we're going to sit there and read freaking Green Eggs and Ham. You didn't even pick one of the damn books that was banned. But yeah, okay, great. You're going to read Green Eggs and Ham, but where were you when they were tearing down statues? Where were you when they were proposing all these insane things? You were nowhere to be found, were you, Republicans? We, the people, have to rise up and take this back. We have to stop being afraid to speak. We have to stop being afraid to be seen. Like I said, I don't necessarily agree with protests, but at this point, I think we're coming to that point where we're going to need to. We're going to, because now again, not violent. I'm saying we have to rise up and be seen and recognize at some point they really can't fire all of us. They can't ban all of us. There is a point where they just can't happen. There has to be, right now, the only reason people can get away with it is because, like the Scarecrow, making people think that there are giant spiders in the walls and that they're on fire and they're running off of buildings. They have us believing that there's more of them than there are of us. And the simple fact of the matter is, that's a lie. They're able to get away with it because they think they can get away with it.
So, and I mean, all valid points. I think I'm going to, for 2 seconds here, I want to jump over, say hi to some of our fans that have joined us here. I see that Steve's with us tonight. Steve, welcome aboard. Everybody out there, lots of good conversations going back. I see some great questions. I do want to take one moment here, and this is what I love about you guys out in the imaginary internet, in the interwebs, including the dog that's here to party. I want you guys to know, I love the way the dialogue works, and I get it. It's a chat thread, just ideas coming in real time. But the level with which you guys can keep up, I mean, you guys are sharp. I just for entertainment's sake, I love that between two texts we can. I'm gonna pick three texts here that I really like. This is from a salty one. He starts from, politicians sell their morality to whomever will keep them in power, followed by, love those sham mattresses, followed by, but we have excised that religious moral check in our country. This is why I do this, because you guys, you're good human people, and I love you for being creative and getting those points out there. I love how Cheese Freak Ginger Snap followed with, The only thing I can agree with Hillary Clinton is that hot sauce and the Tito's Dirty Martini. P.S. Tito's made in Texas, which I believe is actually made not too far from here, just outside of Austin, I believe.
It is. It's
and
amazing.
the smoothest, best vodka ever. I followed by amen, followed by we are all sinners and lacking. I mean, this accountability, right? Followed by AOC. You guys are great. But I do want to address a couple things. Number one, yes, it was Billy Bob Thornton. I realize now that that's who said the line about the scary parts of the Bible. But to the questions, I want to look at what Susan said, because Susan's really, she's tapping into the theme of our show on the deepest level, which is great. We've done one step here, folks, that the national media hasn't been able to cover and the administration hasn't been able to provide, and that is we have identified what the mission objective is. There is a loss of confidence in our government and in our media due to an underlying almost magnetic force driving us, sucking us away from the moral foundations of what our country was founded on. And those values, and they have been turned into.
Nick, did you walk away from your mic?
No, I'm right here.
All right, there you are. Now, yeah, we can hear you now. It sounded like you had covered like you were suffocating your mic with a pillow.
You got to love those sham mattresses. No, what I'm getting at is that the show, Susan, to Susan's point, how do we get back? How do we get back? Susan, I wish I could use the phrase that we have to now get back, but I don't know that the phrase is to get back. And I'm not just arguing the words. I know your question, and I think it's incredibly valid, and I share it with you. How do we get the values that we love, support, and endorse to be back on the forefront there? And what I would say is, I think we find new channels to communicate them. Look, the culture war, if you want to call it that, in my opinion, at this point, we're sitting in Stalingrad. I mean, it's the darkest of the dark. Again, whoever a culture lifts up says what you need to know about that culture. I think right now what our culture lifts up is, I'm just going to speak bluntly, if I may. I think we're fat, dumb, and happy. I think there are good people doing good things. I support our service members and our emergency personnel and our religious personnel and many, many, many of our teachers, having come from that side of the coin. I do think that certain organizations and unions and things are unfortunately having some negative impacts specifically upon our children, and I think that's intolerable. But to get back to those values, I think what we have to do is create a fluid and easily understandable need for people to realize what it is that we are losing. Because if we don't even know what it is that we're losing, how will we ever know when it's gone? And write that down, Alex. That was also a movie quote. If you can, guys, I'm struggling, and you can hear it. You can hear it in me tonight, and I'm glad you can. I want to bring this to you because I want you all to know that I am legitimately struggling with this. I don't know how to redefine truth with another word. It's just the truth. You know, there's this one I will say, I feel like IMDb tonight, but there's a fantastic line in the movie Almost Famous. Remember, it's a story written by Cameron Crowe about this young boy.
Okay, seriously, it sounds like you're suffocating your mic again.
Hello, microphone?
There you go.
Better? Okay. There's a scene in the movie Almost Famous where the young boy is going to interview the band, and when he's there, he meets who becomes his love interest. And when she asks him how old he is, he doesn't want to admit how young he is, so he says, "Oh, I'm 18." And she says, "Me too." And then feeling badly about it, he goes, "I'm 17." She goes, "Me too." Then she looks at him and goes, "Wait a minute. How old are we really?" And he goes, I'm 16. And then she looks at him, and then he pauses again and goes, "I'm 15. And her line to him is, "Isn't it funny how the truth just sounds different?" What I'm getting at is, we're at a point, just reading your comments tonight, guys. We don't believe in these people that are supposed leaders anymore. We certainly don't trust the channels of media to put the information out. So what do we do? To Susan's point, how do we get back to a foundation of truth? I mean, is it possible? I'm not trying to sound dark here, but is it possible? I want you all to know I'm thinking about this. Maybe you guys can help me think about it as well. What do we do in almost a post-truth generation?
Oh, it's not almost. It's not almost. It
But
is.
what do you do? We want this show
Well,
to be about empowerment and about getting us to get into the fight and to participate, not violently, but through our actions, through our words, through our support of one another, through our motivation, through our belief in the foundations that we should be judged off the content of our character, not the color of our skin, that we pledge to each other our sacred honor, that we live in a world that is guided by doing what is right when people aren't looking. If our country can collapse and our Constitution can be burned up in the powers of a former bartender from New York and a governor who makes Hugh Hefner look like an altar boy, then how strong were those institutions to begin with? That's not a slight on the founding fathers. It's a slight on maybe your point that you're making, Alex. This has been going on for so long that it's rotten from the inside out. So the question then has to become, do we try to prop it up and save it, or do we let it disintegrate and start over?
I'm going to make a reference to a book written for children by a friend of the show called The Tower Builders. In it, the metaphor is kind of obvious. The towers is the nation, right? And at some point, the tower builders, the people who were building and planning it, they would go down to the base, to the foundation, to read from the master builders, right? At some point, the tower became so big, so tall, that they stopped. And so they decided they could, and so they rejected all of the early principles of tower building. They started doing all these insane things, and eventually it collapsed. Amongst the rubble, the book was rediscovered. The problem here is, and this goes back to the idea that I said earlier, we've been looking for a perfect system. None exists. The problem isn't the system per se. It's that we have put faith and power in man. We've abdicated our own personal responsibility to men for whom we just said, well, go do what you got to do, and we'll go live our lives so we can have a big screen television and we can have all these nice things, and we don't want to worry about it. We want a perfect world. Well, then you get what you pay for. The problem is you can't get out what you haven't put into it. And if you give all of your power and responsibility to individuals, then you can't really complain when they use that for their own ends, because you knew that all humans are corruptible. If you didn't believe it, then that's on you. If the system falls and collapses, and I think that's what we're seeing, then it is the opportunity to rediscover what the foundation upon which it was built. And that's the thing. No government, no society is any more than one generation old, because it has to be transmitted from generation to generation. A generation that follows has to believe in the principles for that society to continue. We haven't properly transmitted our morality. We haven't properly transmitted the rules and the education and all the philosophies, the things that built this country. We didn't transmit to the generations that followed. Our fathers, their forefathers, they didn't do a good job of it at all. This goes back many generations now, and we are seeing the end result of that corruption. There's a saying, and it's become common and trite, but I think it's common and trite because it is true. Bad times lead to strong men. Strong men lead to good times. Good times lead to weak men. Weak men lead to bad times. We are in the bad times because we have had weak men. We are, as a society, weak and dying, and that's the way it goes. Now, the question is, when it collapses, will we, the people, be in a position to say, you know what? Great. Now that we've learned from our mistakes, let's not repeat them, and let's actually do the right thing. The question is, will the people rise up and do that? That's the question. I don't know. I wish I could tell you. There was a time when, Rush would always say, there's going to be bigger, better days ahead. And I'd like to believe that. I don't know that I have Rush's optimism. What I have is the belief that it can happen. I believe that there's the possibility. Every society goes through these ebbs and flows. Every society is born, lives, and dies. The question is what emerges from it. I don't think this has to be the end of our society, but if we don't want it to actually be the end, then and no matter what we do, we're going to have to change something. We're going to have to radically alter something. There's a huge, massive alteration happening in our nation right now, one way or the other. We can't stay as we are. In fact, I would even say the idea is, how do we get it back? I think back is the wrong phrase. It's how do we conquer this? How do we take this new world that we're in? Because I'm going to say, we look back with nostalgia, but tell me, at what point in time has our nation ever really lived up to the ideals set forth by the founders? Answer is they really haven't.
1997. That was it. It was that one year. It was amazing.
That 1 year. 1 year was an amazing year. It was a beautiful year. It was a beautiful year. It was a great year. But no, but yeah. So, but again, beyond 1997, it never really has. We never really did. We always failed somewhere. I would say, forget looking back, because now we're trying to copy something from the past. We need to look to the future and say, how do we conquer this now and fix this now and make it to be stronger for the future? How do we remove the detritus? And truth be told, I think we need to do a Control-Alt-Delete. And unfortunately, we do need to wrap this up. But I want us to think about the concept of Control-Alt-Delete. In fact, this is something I heard years ago and has really given me a little hope for the future. I grew up as the son of a mechanic, right? The idea was you bought a car, you kept it for 20 years, and you fixed it, right? That's the mentality that most people were raised with, right? However, the last 30 years, we've got a generation that was raised on computers. And what do you do with a computer when it's not functioning correctly? You reboot it. You scrap whatever the mistakes were, wherever the errors were. You press Control-Delete and you restart it. You don't try and fix the corruption. You understand the corruption's too complete. You restart it. You reboot it. Now, you can fix things. You can make things better. You can improve things. But you have to be willing to reboot that system to get it back to where it needs to be. The problem is we've been so unwilling to reboot the system, to take it back to factory default settings and then reload everything, that it has led, I think, to why the system is as corrupt as it is. We didn't say, hold up, we got too far. We need to reset factory settings. So my point here is this: I think this next generation, or the generations that we have, it's very easy to focus on the loud ones, the ones that are burning things down. It's very, very easy to focus on the ones whose hair is tie-dye and can't figure out which bathroom to use. But there is in that generation also a lot of people who don't buy this, who see this as a mistake, who see this as problems. They're waiting for us to show them how to fight. So because they're going to be the ones to say, well, hey, why don't we just get rid of all this detritus, all of this crap? Let's just get rid of it, shut that all down, and start fresh. Let's go back to the basic rules and see where we went right, what things went wrong, and make decisions based off that. Let's not try to save systems that are just inherently flawed. Let's destroy those systems. Because either way, the system as it is going to be destroyed one way or the other. Where they're going to go into socialism and globalism ad nauseum, where we're just more cogs for the machine, or we're going to destroy the system and rebuild something better that's full of liberty, that allows freedom and prosperity. Those are the two options that we have, and there's nothing in between. We cannot
Well,
continue as is.
yeah, I mean, lots to unpack there, and as we wind down, I want to make sure we focus on the show again. That our perspective is just sharing with that of our teammates and fans that are contributing tonight. So I want to step out there for a second, and I'm seeing a lot of recommendations. When we talk about what is it that we can do, again, I want to go to Susan's point. I think it's a fantastic. Again, whether it's how do we get it back, how do we create it anew, whatever. The question is, how do we hold on to these things that we hold dear? How do we do that? And the examples we're seeing, and I think I appreciate Salty One came up with an answer here that I like. It says it's cathartic to people to know that they have a voice and that they can think out loud about the things that affect them daily. That's what I think we're trying to provide, which is a shame that we're hiding out in our little internet channel so that we can do that, because the big bad people outside, are gonna blow you up and dox and do this. I mean, that's a shame. I want to continue down and see, the way to do it is, it's by taking this and growing it and getting that opportunity to create opportunities out there for others. To Susan's point, and I want to thank you all very much for your vulnerability. A lot of you share very personal comments. I see you sending blessings to one another and being open with one another about your communication. That really means a lot. I know that a lot of you guys, maybe you come here and this is a great place for you to spend time, but it's good to see the way you guys also treat each other. It's nice to see what it was like to see people being respectful with one another and kind and gentle and wishing them good blessings. That means a lot. But to Susan, I want to highlight something here. Susan, my very dear uncle lives in Florida, and he is in his mid to late 70s, and he has been talking about the fact that the world that he's now living in, my uncle's one of four. My father is his big brother. And he's explaining to me multiple times that the world is not the one that he thought he would be living in in this phase of his life, right? The golden years and all these timeframes that he thought would be significantly different. And I think that that's why we want to feel like, to your point, it's what can we hold on to and cherish and nurture and plant that seed and make sure that we get it back. I don't think that these things are necessarily lost. I don't. I think that maybe they've gone undercover for a little bit. They're not the new hip thing that's on the radio every 5 minutes. But the thing about the truth is that it's durable and it will stand the test of time and it will present itself again. We just have to be able to grab it, embrace it, cherish it. And to what Cheese Freak said, he mentioned something along the lines of like, I sneak it in whenever I slip it in whenever I can, just slip in the truth, slip in a little bit of that, like, oh, actually this is something here, not in any type of, a flippant way or any sarcastic, just talking to people, just being open. That's there. But what I want to say is, we go in and we speak with one another. And I think it's so important that we do it tonight. Guys, if you look at the number of comments we have, I mean, it's incredible for a little show on the internet to see how much you guys contribute. I really appreciate it. And again, I'm going to use the word vulnerability because to me, vulnerability means strength. I see it takes courage to be vulnerable, is what I'm saying. And I see what you guys are bringing out. And I think what it is that's fascinating is the manner with which guys, I don't think we're alone. I don't. No matter how much it makes us feel like we're alone. Oh, you're closed-minded because you believe in what your faith teaches you. Oh, you're closed-minded because you hold up. Nowhere in my belief structure does it say that I have to go and be unkind to anybody in this world at all. In fact, I'm reminded multiple times to love everybody. It doesn't mean I have to agree with them. It just means that I want to carry and conduct myself as such. We were all created by the same God. I simply am saying that at the end of this times, it's funny, I came through tonight looking for this big concept in truth and what's truth. And the only thing that I believe in truth is that without it, we're lost. But what was revealed tonight is a truth. And that truth is A, we're not alone. B, the values that we all share are strong and good. And we're here willing to speak them proudly and to stand on top of that hill and to make America and to make ourselves want to be part of that place that's that shining light on the hill. So I'll end and kick it back to Alex by just saying thank you for reminding me through your courage, through your vulnerability, why we do this. Because I want you to know that you're not alone. The fears that you may feel, the concerns that you have, I want you to know are valid and we hear you. And if this show is nothing more than to be here for us to acknowledge that and show that respect to one another, I want you all to know that we are right here and we're not going anywhere. I wish you all peace, prayers, and positivity in your life. And I'm going to think about Susan's question. So thank you for that. I'm going to appreciate all of you for your contributions tonight. And let's think about how we can do that Control-Alt-Delete. And like a salty one said, and then clear the cache, wipe it all out. I'm with you guys. Let's keep thinking, keep sharing that love and positivity with one another. And we look forward to you guys joining us again soon.
Guys, thank you. Push that like and subscribe, and do feel free to share this video to inflict us upon friends and enemies alike. Again, we're not in this alone. We are in this together. We can do this. We just have to figure it out, and we need to. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take all of us, and that's what the show's
We're
about.
big in Sheboygan. We're big in Sheboygan.
But we are big in Sheboygan, and once we have Sheboygan behind us, man, it's all over.
It's 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, baby.
Guys, we appreciate y'all, and we'll see y'all